right, Carlton King, the former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, and also looks into the world of geopolitics. Today's show is a little bit different because what we're going to do
is explain the context of my work and operations without having a guest on. And various people ask me how this might happen in the secret world. I intend to answer them. But I guess first and foremost what I should do is just explain, for those who don't know, what my background is so you can understand where I'm coming from. The Black Spy podcast is called Black Spy Podcast for simple reason I'm black and I was a spy. I'm a British secret intelligence officer who has worked in most of the departments of Britain's secret intelligence apparatus, be that in the Special Branch, which is a section of Scotland Yard, and therefore has the police powers to arrest people. What I should explain is most security services around the world are police in terms of their power, be that the FBI, be it the French DST, be it the old-fashioned Soviets and the KGB. They all had police powers to be able to arrest, question people. Well, in the British system, we've got a dual system. We've basically got what most people know of as MI5, the real name, the security service, who have no police powers. They're civilian. They can't arrest people, can't question people, can't demand that people come and speak to them as police can because you're arresting and questioning them. So they just have the intelligence remit in terms of national security. And that would be the equivalent of the FBI. And I'll speak about the American services because most people in Britain and indeed around the world understand the American system purely and simply because there are many films and they're made in Hollywood. But then we also had the Special Branch, which actually was the Metropolitan Police Special Branch, which was the first security and intelligence service in the United Kingdom, set up in Scotland Yard, and it was designed to fight what was known in those days as the Fenian, the forerunner of the IRA, the Irish Brotherhood. And these were people who wanted to, if you will, push off the British yoke and have Ireland as an independent state, and decided to do that by ways of what we would today call terrorism, blowing things up, and indeed they blew up New Scotland Yard. And this organisation was formed, which was called the Special Irish Branch, and its task was, in Scotland Yard, and its task was to defeat these individuals who'd come across from Ireland to mainland Great Britain and to destroy that organisation. That was formed in 1883. It was successful. They defeated the Fenians at that particular time. They would come back later as the IRA and various other organisations. But so the government thought, we can't get rid of this organisation, so they kept it as Britain's sole security and intelligence organisation, dropped the word Irish, because it used to be called the Special Irish Branch, and it just became the Special Branch of Scotland Yard. And that's how the Special Branch came about. Later, some 30-odd years later, in 1909, the security service was born, MI5, and basically that came about because the head of Special Branch had to leave the police because he'd done his 30 years, and he wished to continue in this secret area and was able to lobby government to allow him to form an organisation. His name was Melvin, to form an organisation that was not part of the police, but it would not have police powers. And that is how MI5 came along, and MI6, which is the external service, grew out of MI5, again, because of Melville and because of what the special branch were doing. So in Britain, what we have internally, so domestically, we have MI5, the security service, and what used to be called the special branch. That was disbanded in 2006 in the Metropolitan Police in Scotland Yard, and it's now called the Counter-Terrorism Command. Let me explain. Scotland Yard is the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police. So you'll hear me interspersing Metropolitan Police or Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard is the body that has a national responsibility for quite a few things from the Metropolitan Police, and Special Branch had national responsibility for fighting domestic activities. So when the security service, MI5, were watching a spy who's carrying out actions against the United Kingdom, and that spy needs to be arrested or even needs to be put on a legal footing, then they have to inform the special branch. We'll talk about the special branch rather than what I just said before, SO15, which is the counter-terrorism branch. Because what I will do is I'll keep the knowledge backwards in time, because we have a very powerful act in the United Kingdom which is called the Official Secrets Act, and one has to be very careful not to give anything away that can be at all perceived as being an official secret. So if we keep it on the special branch, but just know that after 2006 it was basically roundabout renamed as the Counter-Terrorism Command of Scotland Yard. So I was part of that organisation. It had a very difficult process for entering the organisation. There were many, many examinations, and then one had to become, if one was successful in the examinations, one had to become vetted, and that means that your whole background was searched into. And then once you received developed vetting, which is the highest level of vetting in the United Kingdom, the vetting that you get in MI5 or you get in MI6 is exactly the same, or in the military, the few places in the military that have this vetting level, then you can see the secrets of the United Kingdom. So I had obtained that vetting within Special Branch, MPSB, Metropolitan Police Special Branch, and therefore I was able to investigate all of the issues which affected the United Kingdom, be it in tandem with the security service, MI5, or the Special Branch had its own targets and its own actions by itself. So it understand, it is not tasked by anybody else. It is a police body, so police perform their own actions. So that was my role. Later I would, and I should explain, when I said it was difficult to get in, the year that I sat, and it was once a year one used to recruit, there was about 1,300 people applied for the role, and 10 people, I was one of the 10, who were finally taken into the branch. So that's the sort of level of fallout from those people who wished to be recruited to those actually got recruited into the branch. Once you were recruited in the branch, you could spend the rest of your career. So I was lucky enough to be recruited in with 2 years in the Metropolitan Police Service, and then the rest of my time, which would be 28 years, was spent in the branch and allied activity. So from the branch, I was seconded to MI6 after a selection process, MI6 being Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service, a body that is external to the United Kingdom. So for want of a better word, they are the spies. So put it into the American context again, that would be the body that is like the CIA. So I was selected as a case officer, and that basically means you are the person, again to explain it the best way, who carries out the actions that you see on James Bond. The person who organises operations, plans them, goes out around the world and obtains spies or destroys organisations on behalf of that organisation. So I did several years within that organisation, again completely separate organisation to Metropolitan Police Special Branch, but I was in there. I then was also a member of the domestic extremism body in the police in general, England's So that's for England, Wales and Scotland, which was called the National Public Order Intelligence Unit, set up in Scotland Yard with special branches, and there were secondees from Metropolitan Police Special Branch at the if you will, the management level. And I was at the management level in that organisation. My job there was strategic analysis. I formed, in fact, that organisation to look at issues that would cause a problem to the United Kingdom between 3 to 5 years hence. So we looked at everything from pandemics, and what would the problem be then? How would that pandemic take place? Maybe it was started by a foreign intelligence organisation, etc., to looking at extreme right-wing politics in the United Kingdom. How would that affect the country? Extreme left-wing animal liberation organisations. How would they affect the well-being of the nation and the economic prosperity of the United Kingdom? And then I was part of Special Branch. His role was also to protect the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, etc., so the most powerful people in the British Cabinet, and visitors to the United Kingdom who were heads of state or heads of government. So the President of the United States, President of Russia, the presidents of any country, indeed, Chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, or the Chancellor of the German Republic. So basically, it was the top politicians were protected by Special Branch, and subsequently, when Special Branch was disbanded, that part, the protection element, was split off from Special Branch, what later became, as I said to you before, the Counter-Terrorism Branch, and that then became SO1, Specialist Protection, and I was one of the founders of that organisation. In the past, the Special Branch officers were intelligence officers, so there was an intelligence collection aspect in protection. In SO1, that was no longer the case. So I give you that, and I hope it's not too long-winded, and I should explain that is the same as the US Secret Service. So you can understand that basically the roles that I've undertaken are roles that are the same as being in the FBI, being in the CIA, and being in the US Secret Service. So if you looked at the US systems, I've been in all three of those systems, and also I've been deep undercover in many. So that's my knowledge. So when I look through their life, I'll host them and look through their lives, they will have one thing in common with each other. All of them will have a great interest in the secret world in Britain and beyond, because I've worked practically in 3/4 of the countries of the world, with agencies or against agencies of those countries. And so we will be discussing these issues from that perspective. So, first question. Yeah. Okay. So, as you said, yes, I did meet Princess Diana on a couple of occasions. I'll give you two interesting anecdotes from that. One was much early on in my career in MPSB, in Special Branch, I was assigned the task of protecting the Governor-General of Canada, who had visited the United Kingdom. And she wanted to go and see Les Miserables. And because I knew that that's a very popular thing, and I'd heard that royalty may well be there, I spoke with Royalty Protection, which is a different unit than Special Branch. They protect solely the royals, because as I said to you before, Special Branch had also the remit in terms of collecting intelligence. Well, originally, way back in the 1880s, Queen Victoria didn't like the idea of effectively a secret police, which is what Special Branch was, protecting her and her sons and so on and so forth. You may look back into history and understand that some of the sons of Queen Victoria may not have been, let's just say, always doing things in a positive manner. And she didn't want a secret police assessing them. So a body was formed that was basically effectively a uniform body in the Metropolitan Police. Obviously, they were not in uniform, they're in plain clothes. As all of the tasks that I'm explaining to you are detective roles, for want of a better word, in plain clothes, albeit they're not detectives. And they were tasked with the job of looking after the Queen. So the royal family in Britain is looked after by Royalty Protection. Visiting royals, who are heads of state and heads of government, were always protected by Special Branch. Visiting to the United Kingdom, that is. So I needed to speak to royalty and just deconflict with them to make sure that as an armed individual going into, and you've got to understand, arms are highly controlled in the United Kingdom. So you need to deconflict, because one doesn't need to people with arms because somebody sees a weapon and they may think it's an attack, because they're very rare generally. So I deconflicted with my royalty people and realised that Princess Diana was going to be there with the Queen Mother. I told the Governor General this, and she said, "Oh, please, I'm a great fan of the Queen Mother. Could I get to see her?" So I said, "Yeah, of course you can. And what I'll try and do is speak to the royalty, and in the break, we'll go and see them." So that's what we did. And as I came through, the Royal Highness of Queen Mother was there and Princess Diana. Now, I believe the protocol for royalty is not to touch royalty. However, Queen Mother put her hand out to the Governor General of Canada, and obviously she held her hand and curtsied to her. She took no account of me at all, the Queen Mother. But Princess Diana did. And she put her hand out and I put my hand out and we shook hands and we spoke. And I could see the royalty guys looking bemused. What is this? Touching a royal type of thing. So we spoke. And then the Queen Mother said nothing to me. And then after 3 or 4 minutes, we left. And I took the Governor General with me. And we went and sat in our box and watched Les Miserables. Some several weeks later, I was coming back from a protection. I think it could have been of the then South African from the white regime who were visiting the United Kingdom to try and look at settling the problems in South Africa. So there was myself and quite a big team, and I was in the rear of one of our protection vehicles. We dropped them off at Heathrow, and all of a sudden I heard the peeping of a horn several times, beep, 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 beep. And the driver of our vehicle, and the fellow was in the front, he said, "There's somebody beeping trying to get your attention." So I looked out, and there's a woman and a chap in a expensive sports car. I think it was an Aston Martin. And they were looking over, and I didn't clock who this person was. And then I realised it was Princess Diana, and she was pointing at me like trying to get my attention to speak to her. Well, luckily the traffic moved. This was basically on the main drag down by the Dorchester, and it's always busy with traffic there, so we were moving very, very slow. But then the royalty guy who was driving the vehicle, he was driving and she was leaning over, pressing the hooter for the vehicle, and he then drove off. So I didn't get the opportunity to stop and speak, which is what she wanted to do. So that's just a little bit of an interesting story there about how I met, some of the times I met Diana. Yeah, okay. At the Olympics opening ceremony in London, it did show James Bond protecting the Queen. And I think she's called Maggie, the person who's written in, asked the question, is it correct that it's MI5's job, not MI6's job, to protect the royals? Maggie, it's neither job. The job of protecting the royals, as I said just previously, is a job of royalty protection, which is a part of the Metropolitan Police. People often misunderstand in Britain the powers of the police and assume that if there's a higher echelon job, it's the task of either MI5 or MI6, whom I just said to you before, are purely civilians, who have no police powers. So therefore, for them to protect somebody without any power whatsoever would not be possible, because you can't stop anybody from doing anything. Yes, they have private security people who carry out protection for celebrities, but again, they've got no powers. They can't do anything. And, if you grab hold of somebody, that's an assault, so there's a problem for them. So the people with those type of powers are the police. Yes, the military sometimes protect individuals, but there's other military people, and that's like Special Forces, SAS, SBS, carry out a protective security role, as do the Royal Military Police abroad for our ambassadors, but not in the United Kingdom. They don't have the powers in the United Kingdom. The protection role in the United Kingdom, official protection role, I'm talking about governmental armed protection, and by the way, those police are the ones who can carry the arms, are carried out by the Special Branch, now SO1, Specialist Protection, or Royalty Protection. I believe the person putting in the question here is Dan, And what he asks is, have you ever been frightened on a mission? Let me put it this way, probably a better way of putting it. What the situation is, generally, when you're on operations, you get a heightened sense of what might be happening. And if you want some understanding of some type of the missions, then, as I said, you can read my book, Black Ops, The Incredible True Story of a British Secret Agent. And you'll hear that I lay an ambush example with a colleague for an IRA active service unit. That's a unit of people who are out there to carry out assassinations and bombings. And this was an assassination of a British official. We'd moved the official out the branch. And by the way, I should explain, Special Branch retained the role of defeating Irish extremism in the United Kingdom. So it was always the branch's role. And this was during the height of one of the campaigns to blow up and kill people on the mainland. And we'd received information that this was going to be the case. And two of us managed to secrete ourselves into the building where this individual, the home of this individual, and we awaited the arrival of this active service unit. And I explained that in the book, so it's best to read it. So yes, in a circumstance like that, your heart is pounding, especially when you hear the door opening, which was the case. You're ready, and you've got to deal with the issue as it comes along. But I'll tell you another one which might be just as interesting, in fact, potentially even more interesting, when you come back to this heightened sense of thinking and understanding about what you do. I've carried out many operations in Iraq, Afghanistan during the war, protection operations and others. And also I was on another operation in another place. I won't say where it was, as a case officer in the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, and I was chasing down a terrorist. I wanted to turn an individual to work for me. Now, what I should explain is, although my book is entitled Black Ops, The Incredible True Story of a British Secret Agent, we do not call ourselves agents. Unfortunately, my publisher said, call yourself an agent because that's what people understand. Agents are the people we turn, be it we turn them against their country because they're other intelligence officers that we turn, be they politicians we turn against their country, be it people involved more and more today. What's the biggest threats today is terrorism. Be it more and more today, we turn terrorists in terrorist organisations against that organisation, and we keep them in that organisations. Those are what we call secret agents. The people we have turned. In police general parlance, dealing with crime, you'd call them informants. We don't use that in secret intelligence, never have in the branch. We always call them agents. If you watch Line of Duty, you'll see they call them CHISIs, covert human intelligence sources. That's the same thing. That's the same thing as an informant. We call them agents in the security and intelligence world, secret world. So it's somebody you turn, and he's or she is an agent. And so I'd been working to try and get this agent, chase him around the world. I thought we could turn this person. I'd had my team, because as a case officer, you're a senior guy, you have a big team, you can work systems, you can get intelligence, you can look at, plan how you might make an operation function. You will utilise GCHQ to get signals intelligence, intercepts, whatever you might need in order to see whether this person might well be turned. So there's a lot of work goes into this. So I'm explaining that because a lot of work had gone into this operation that I thought I could turn this person. Now, in the place I was, I'd arranged a meet. It was a place that was potentially dangerous for us, and it's always dangerous when you're trying to do that because you're there by yourself, and you may get killed or captured. So yeah, we did have the choice of maybe utilising some support. That support was generally from UK Special Forces when you try to utilise that support, but I didn't want to do that because using UK Special Forces, SAS, SBS, etc. Oftentimes those individuals have a bearance because of the military, and people see that military bearance, and I've always thought, because I was in the branch, and because I worked the border, when we saw people coming into the United Kingdom, we'd look out for individuals with a military bearance, because you could see it. And then you might question these people closely. So it always stuck with me on the other side, now spying in somebody else's land, that might be the thing that lets you down when you're carrying out an operation. So I generally try and do it myself without support, unless it was absolutely required to get military support. So on this occasion, I'd set this thing up in this country, and by what we call natural cover, so an undercover, the guy didn't know who I was, the person didn't know who I was, and I'd come under a different cover to speak with this person. But that isn't to say they haven't figured out something. So I can remember I was in bed at that one particular night in the hotel, playing the role I was playing as a very wealthy individual, and I had a dream. And the dream was that I was driving in a taxi, and next minute it changed from a taxi into a racetrack, and we're driving down the racetrack. And you know, when you have a dream, generally, and you fall off something, you never hit the ground, because they say if you hit the ground, you're dead. Well, on this occasion, this had changed into a racetrack, and driving down the road in the racetrack was a vehicle behind me. And I said to the taxi driver, hey, listen, there's, which now become the race driver, hey, these cars are behind us. And then all of a sudden, bang, we got hit by a car, hit us straight into the back in my dream. And I woke up with my body feeling like it had been physically hit by something. And I took that to mean it's time to leave. So I basically called the concierge, said, order me a limo to take me to the airport, and I left and didn't progress that operation on that day. So what I'm saying to you is, I think you have to understand those heightened senses. And I believe what probably happened was that during that day, or the run-up to the meet, when I was going through other individuals in order to make that happen, that maybe I sensed something that I didn't really want to accept, because of course he'd done a lot of work on trying to get this gal, I'll leave no gender, and maybe I just knew it wasn't right. And I think you have to live to those senses in this game, because if you get caught, you can die a horrible death. Later on, if you have recruited an individual, particularly in terrorism, to be your agent, and that individual is caught, that individual loses their life, the life of their family potentially, and everybody around them. And of course, you end up in a orange jumpsuit and potentially being executed on the internet. So, yes, you've got frightened, I wouldn't say, but I think you have to heighten your senses and understand when something functions and can function, and when it can go wrong. And I think that's very, very important. Next question. You hear this a lot. Was Princess Diana murdered? All I'd say is this to explain that, and so you can understand that. If you are setting out an operation, quite a few people are involved, and you can tighten up the number of people who are involved. I've done loads of operations. But let me tell you something. Who gets that operation? If somebody would have come to me and said, oh, this is your role, we want you to do this, the first thing I would think is, what's happening here? I must be expendable. If I carried this out, what would then happen to me subsequently? Because I'd be and the people who would work this through would also think, so you went to the special forces to carry this out, they would also be thinking, well, hold on, if I do this, what happens to me afterwards? So when you've got to look at these sort of conspiracies that people have, you have to think in the round of how organisations function. And so I would argue it is highly unlikely, look, in this world you can never say never, highly, 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 highly unlikely that such an operation was carried out by any part of British intelligence that I'm familiar with. That's all I'd say on that subject. I think the question you just posed, I think I basically answered that right in the beginning in terms of my selection to the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. However, probably here's a good opportune moment actually to explain the differences in terms of how the British system works, and unfortunately how it functions within our society, which is a class-based society, so that our systems are class-based as well. So the biggest difference, frankly, between Scotland Yard Special Branch and now Counter-Terrorism Command and SO1 and the and the security and intelligence services, MI5, MI6. GCHQ is a little bit different. I should explain that GCHQ is the Government Communications Headquarters, basically the same as the NSA. I have not been in that organisation. That is an organisation that actually works about getting intelligence via means through the airwaves, signals, computers, and so on and so forth. So that actually is an egalitarian organisation, you could argue, because it's always just needed people with technical capacity. But if you look at MI5 and MI6, the way that's worked is worked within the class system of the United Kingdom. And so what has happened is, within that system, is the individuals who were in it went to either Oxford, Cambridge, let's argue St Andrews, Durham, maybe even Imperial College, or were in the military as officers and had been to the staff college, but were of a certain class of individual. And those individuals were brought into the service in the past, basically by the master, the dean of a college or something, knocking a person on the shoulder and saying, have you ever thought of a job in the Foreign Office, or have you ever thought of a job in the Home Office? Nod and a wink. So that's how that happened. So you're with the right class, you're in the right university, Russell Group University, and you were considered to be the right sort, and you were brought into the organisation. That's the way it used to work. Obviously, for special branches, a little bit different, a lot different, massively different, in that you had to join the Metropolitan Police first to be an MPSB. Now, what you need to understand is post-1964, all police forces, of which there were 48 in England and Wales and 6 in Scotland, had their own special branches, were very small. Basically, the mother special branch was the Met, and they had national responsibility throughout the whole of the UK, of Great Britain. So the recruitment to that was different. However, again, because of the selection process was orientated towards class thinking, the people who had been to public schools, like in MI5 and MI6, and when you say public schools, I should explain for our American listeners and other listeners around the world, the public schools are what we perceive as a private school. So schools like Eton, where the fees are £30,000 a term or whatever in order to get in. Those are the sort of people who were brought into MI5 and MI6. So the security service and the secret intelligence service. Now, we had some of those people in the police, maybe lesser known public schools, although there were people who were in Harrow and places like that. So yeah, those are good public schools who were in the Met, who ended up in special branch, and who applied and got in. Now, the reason being because the classical element of that education, as I said, there were many examinations to get in, focused on what you knew about politics, what you knew about world geography in terms of countries, what you knew about political systems, what you knew about various books, and how the state ran. Who is a Lord Privy Seal, example. That type of thing is not taught in general British schools. So obviously people with that background had the advantage. And also it required a very good standard of English and so on and so forth. They wanted foreign languages, my advantage. And so those issues tended to lend themselves towards people who've had an education in the public school system. So that's why the elite tended to be in those two organisations. And it was said of the Metropolitan Police, basically most of the graduates in the Metropolitan Police Service at the time were in special branch. So, it had the highest percentage of graduates from the Met in special branch. So that's the type of situation that led you there. Now, I'm a working class guy from a working class background. That's what I've about people who went to a working class normal school. So, you needed to work doubly hard. I also had problems in terms of having dyslexia, so I had to work doubly hard to get in. But if you knew that, that's what you wish to do. I'd always had an interest in politics, which is something that's different. From the time I can remember, I was listening to every political radio station I could get hold of. I mean, I learnt best by listening and watching political programmes, reading political books. So that lent me to that process. But for others, it would be very, very difficult, I would suggest, to get in. And as I said, to get into MI5 or MI6, I'll use those designations, doubly difficult because you wouldn't have had the nod on the shoulder if you weren't from a top university. Now, there were people in MI5 and MI6 from red brick universities, of course they were, which what we call red brick universities, general universities in Britain. But they were doing lesser jobs. They weren't doing the case officer role. So I would say for the vast majority of case officers, like I was a case officer, in fact, I would suggest that at the time, I think I was probably, from what I knew anyway, one of the very, very few working class case officers. And indeed, the only black case officer that I knew of. So that's what I'm saying. Now, is that a deficit for the organisation? Yes, it is. It was. Because I guess in the old days when you were talking about soft bloc activity, so most of the activity going against fighting the Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact, then it was our elite against the Soviet Warsaw Pact elite, same kind of people. It functions. When you come into terror, it's a big difference. You need to understand why somebody would put their life on being a terrorist, why somebody would blow themselves up to be that. You need to understand that. I don't think you understand that if you've always had advantage. And generally people who go to the top unis have had advantage all their life. So you need people who understand disadvantage, I think. I think that's where the service fell down. Now, of course, over the last 20 years, 15 years, I think the service has tried to do quite a lot. I say the service, I'm talking about 5 and 6, have tried to do quite a lot. They definitely diversified. They always had women, but now you get more women in case officer roles. Women in the past used to be secretaries most of the time, but really from the 60s, 70s, you've had women who've been making the way in it. So it wasn't a women thing. It was a class thing in terms of gender as well. So working class women, very, very few, I would have suggested. So that's the point I'm making. What was more important, and indeed in British society in general, what's more important is the class rather than any other issue, gender or race to some extent, because you can overcome them. Yes, you will be seen for the race you are. Yes, you are seen for the gender you are. But, if you've got a certain class element to you, you can spring that. It's when you haven't that it becomes very, very difficult, because then all the odds are against you. And that's been our system. You will have politicians whose sons and daughters, you'll have landowners whose sons and daughters, I'm talking ancient landowners now, not somebody who just bought his land 40 years ago because he's made some money as an entrepreneur. I'm talking about the old systems. Those are the ones who ran. The sons and daughters of those old systems were in the organisation. Very capable people. Don't misunderstand me. Capable people. But people who had worked in a certain fashion over many, many years. And that suits on many occasions, as I said before, particularly when you were talking about two iconic systems, socialism, communism, and capitalism. It can function. It functions less when you're talking other issues. And I think that was a downfall of the service in one way. And I think I made a difference in that as well, in understanding why people wish to do things, and then therefore understanding why they'd maybe change their mind. In terms of recruiting them, then it made it, recruiting agents, it made it, I had a more innate capacity to recruit agents in the terrorist milieu, let's say within that milieu, definitely. Question was, do you have a license to kill? Right. Okay, so in MI6, so in the Intelligence Services Act of 1997, I think, could be 95, don't give me on my axe. Basically, what that act says is that an officer in the Secret Intelligence Service working on the behalf of Queen and Country on an operation that has been signed off, and I should explain that in the United Kingdom, intelligence agencies are basically, and security service, are basically under the political body. So, example, the Home Secretary is responsible for the Security Service, MI5, and the Foreign Secretary is responsible for the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. And up until 2000, to be truthful, the Home Secretary was responsible for the Metropolitan Police, so hence why the Special Branch and various others were in that. Now it's the Mayor of London, but there's still an element of the Home Secretary being related to it where it comes to national issues. And understandably, the Met in its Special Branch, and then subsequently now in SO15 and SO1, so that's the Anti-Terrorist Command and SO1 Special Protection, there is an overarching national element, and so the Home Secretary has some input into those processes. So those are the political masters, and those political masters do control the services. So these are not rogue in any way, shape or means. So basically, things have to be authorised. So if you've got an authorised operation, authorised by the service, and you're carrying that operation out, then you have a licence to commit crimes. I'm not going to say to commit crimes, right? Because, of course, being a spy in a foreign country, in that country, is a crime. So if I go to a country, regardless of wherever that is, and I do not declare that I am spying in that country, I am committing an offence of that country, which is, of course, why I was in the Special Branch looking for those people committing those crimes, those intelligence officers from other countries. And if you got them, they could be arrested and put on trial and imprisoned for that. So, yeah, so you have to have this perspective whereby going out there doing things on behalf of the state, you can do that without committing offences against the United Kingdom law. Thank you for everybody who put their questions to us, and hopefully the answers that I provided and the information we went through wasn't too long-winded, but I think, frankly, if you need to understand what's going on, we've done that now. This was the explanatory episode, so you now understand how things function, us in future, rather than me just explaining the processes of this, frankly, schizophrenic secret world, which, for most, is just unobtainable. Thank you very much. Please think about subscribing, and see you in the next episode.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
In the quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.